Every living biological organisms is made of cells. They can be either unicellular or multicellular. Cell biology is a branch of biology that studies the structure, function, and behavior of cells. In this video series we will discuss about cell biology in detail. As we all know, each cell is covered with cell membrane, or plasma membrane. Let's talk about plasma membrane in detail. So let's talk about plasma membrane. As the name suggests, it is the fluid-like outer covering of cell. For this reason it is also known as cell membrane or cellular membrane. The plasma membrane is made up of phospholipid bilayer and some protein and little amount of carbohydrates. So we can say that, the thin outer covering of a cell, mainly composed of lipid, protein and carbohydrates, is called plasma membrane. So what are the functions of cell membrane? It acts as a protective barrier, or shield against foreign particles, and prevents it to enter inside the cell. As we know, the cell is made up of cytoplasm without any proper structure. So plasma membrane also provide the cell its shape and helps to maintain it. One of the major property of the cell membrane is that it is semi-permeable or selectively permeable in nature. It means it only allows some selective molecules or ions to enter inside the cell or go outside of it. The plasma membrane contains specialized proteins which are responsible for cellular signaling. So what is the structure of the cell membrane? The cell membrane is composed of majorly lipids and proteins, which is present in 50-50 ratio. Except from these, there is also presence of carbohydrates in form of glycolipid and glycoprotein. As you can see in the picture, the lipids are phospholipid and cholesterols. There is also some sphingolipid which are in very little concentration. The membrane proteins are mainly present in form of integral channel proteins or peripheral proteins. Let's discuss membrane lipids in detail. The lipids are mainly fat-soluble substances. In the membrane, the lipids are found mainly in three types: phospholipid, cholesterol and sphingolipid. As you can see in the picture, the phospholipids are illustrated in white color. They are present as bilayer, facing opposite direction. The cholesterols are illustrated as orange color in picture. These are important substances which help the membrane to maintain its fluidity. Let's look into details of phospholipid. The majority of the membrane lipids are in this form. The phospholipids are present in bilayer formation, each facing opposite direction from other. The phospholipids has a hydrophilic head which stays outside of the membrane either on cytoplasmic side or extracellular side, and a hydrophobic tail which are present, facing inside. As you can see in the picture, the hydrophilic head is composed of a phosphate group and glycerol, whereas the hydrophobic tail consists of two fatty acid chains. The hydrophilic means the heads are water-loving side as they contain polar phosphate group, whereas hydrophobic tails are water-hating side as they contain fatty acids. Now let's talk about cholesterol. The cholesterols are sterol, which is a class of lipid. The cholesterols have a bulkier hydrophobic body. They are bound with the hydrophobic tails of phospholipid molecules. The cholesterols are essential as it changes the fluidity of the plasma membrane. As you can see in the picture, the cholesterol has a hydrophilic hydroxyl group, and the rest of the part is hydrophobic body. We will talk about how cholesterol controls cell membrane's fluidity in detail in the next video. In this picture you can see how cholesterol, sphingolipids and membrane proteins are compactly found in some places of the plasma membrane. These parts of the cell membrane is known as the lipid rafts. These lipid rafts are the functioning part of the plasma membrane. As we know, the cell membrane is a big structure, but the whole part of the plasma membrane does not necessarily functionally active. Mainly this lipid rafts are the region which is the active part of the membrane. In these parts the concentration of cholesterol, sphingolipids and membrane proteins is more than the phospholipid concentration. These are the parts which are responsible for cell signaling and other major functions. Now let's talk about the membrane proteins. The proteins are divided into mainly two categories in the plasma membrane: integral and peripheral proteins. The peripheral proteins are the type of protein which are located entirely outside the lipid bilayer, on either the extracellular or the cytoplasmic surface, and are associated with membrane by non-covalent bonds. Whereas the integral proteins are the proteins which penetrate the lipid bilayer. The integral proteins can be further divided into anchor proteins, which can be lipid anchored or GPI anchored. and transmembrane proteins, which penetrate the lipid bilayer, single, or multiple times. The transmembrane proteins mainly act as the channel proteins. So what are the functions of the membrane proteins? Membrane proteins act as the intercellular joinings between cells. It also has enzymatic activities. One of the major function of membrane protein is that it helps in transport, which can be either active transport that requires ATP, or can be passive transport with the help of channel proteins. Membrane proteins also helps in the signal transduction pathway, or act as receptor. Now let's talk about the third component of the plasma membrane, which is carbohydrate. The carbohydrates are present mainly in glycolipid or glycoprotein forms. If the carbohydrate is attached with the protein, it is called glycoprotein. And if it is attached with the lipid, it is called the glycolipid. These are the short-chain carbohydrates which are present majorly on the extracellular side of the cell membrane. They mainly act in the cell recognition process, or act as a natural barrier. In the next video we will talk about the fluid mosaic model of cell membrane. If you liked the video, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.